Thanks for joining me in another of my series on wildlife photography using bridge cameras. In this video, we will look at various camera settings and my suggestions. Unfortunately, the terminologies used in different camera menus varies between manufacturers. Different terms are sometimes used for the same function. Menus can be quite confusing to new photographers. However, I consider it important to learn the menus of the camera that you use or own. My camera settings suggestions provide only an overview of some basic settings. I have learned these settings mostly through trial and error over the past few years by taking photos of wildlife in various situations. The cameras that I own or have used are from 3 different manufacturers. All have different terminologies used in their menus. Hopefully, with a little effort, you will be able to relate my suggestions to the menus in your camera. This photo of a black oyster catcher was taken with a Nikon P1000 zoomed to 2400 mil. Image quality is partially dependent on file size and is expressed as JPEG and RAW. If RAW is selected, all the data from the light sensor is saved to a file, while the JPEG file is reduced in size and eliminates some of the information. The RAW file has advantages in that some mistakes in the photo can be corrected with post-processing because all of the data is present. The drawback to RAW files is that they are considerably larger in size than JPEG files, so more time is required to send them to the storage card. When the camera buffers are filled, the camera will slow down or stop taking photos until there is more room in the buffer. I have always used the JPEG setting and am pleased with the photos. I can still do post-processing, but not as much as I could with a RAW file. This black-bellied duck photo was taken with a Panasonic Lumix FZ80 at 1000 mil. The image size menu settings usually offer a choice of pixel numbers. I suggest using the largest numbers available for the best photos. This Catalegret photos was taken with a Panasonic Lumix FZ80 extended to full zoom of 1200 mil plus another 1200 of digital zoom. This is the only bridge camera I've used where the digital zoom performed amazingly well. I never used digital zoom with any of the other bridge cameras. Metering choices relate to an area of light sensor that is used for setting exposure. The choices are the entire area of the sensor, referred to as matrix by Nikon or evaluative by Panasonic, or a smaller area surrounding the center, referred to as center weighted, or a spot at the center. I use spot metering for wildlife. I think it does the best job for determining the exposure of the subject. The photo of these great blue herons was taken with a Panasonic FZ80. Shooting mode. We'll consider only aperture, shutter, manual, program, and auto modes. There are other specialized modes that I rarely use. Many people that I meet, regardless of what camera they use, only shoot in the auto mode. Perhaps they find all the menu choices to be overwhelming. I'm sure manufacturers put a lot of thought into making the menus simple and as concise as possible, but because modern cameras have many functions, a lot of menu choices are required. People may also shoot in the auto mode because there are certain times when the auto mode will produce a good photo, and that is all they desire. However, there are other times, because of varying conditions, that the auto mode doesn't perform as desired. More control can be had by the photographer by using other modes. The program mode is similar to the auto mode, but offers much more control through a wide range of menu selections. I feel like the program mode is far superior to the auto mode. In certain situations, I still use the program mode. When the aperture mode is selected, the photographer controls the aperture and the camera controls the shutter speed. I see videos where several wildlife photographers prefer aperture mode. I feel like this is a poor choice with bridge cameras because bridge cameras don't have constant aperture lenses. As the lens is zoomed in on the subject, the aperture automatically is stopped down so the photographer doesn't really have many choices. If shutter speed is selected, the photographer controls the shutter speed and the camera controls the aperture. The three elements of exposure are shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. ISO is not a function on the mode dial and is controlled by another button or with a menu setting. Bridge cameras don't do well at low ISOs because of their smaller light sensors. I usually use AutoSO with a limit set at 800 ISO. If manual is selected, the photographer has control over all the elements of exposure. A drawback to using the manual mode in situations where the subject is rapidly changing positions, there may not be time to adjust all the controls. Most bridge cameras that I am familiar with allow for setting auto ISO while in the manual mode. This is my favorite shooting mode because the camera zoom controls the aperture at longer ranges, and with the ISO set to auto, the manual mode basically becomes a shutter speed mode with a little aperture mode thrown in when the lens is zoomed to close distances. This means that the photographer has time to make the necessary adjustments even in the manual mode. This photo of a black neck stilt was taken with a Panasonic FZ80 at 1200 mil. Shooting rate refers to how many times the shutter opens and closes with each press of the shutter button, as well as the shutter speed. The three choices are single, continuous, and burst. Burst is probably the best for birds in flight and fast-moving animals. I use this mode only in those instances. Opting for the continuous rate instead. This photo of a western kingbird was taken with a Panasonic FZ80 at 1200 mil plus another 1200 mil of digital zoom, making it 2400 mil. This kingfisher photo would have been a good candidate for using the burst rate, but I captured it using the continuous rate. This great egret taking off is another example of a photo that I captured using the continuous rate instead of the burst rate. Camera sounds. Unfortunately, I don't hear well, and most of the camera sounds are beyond my hearing abilities. But animals do hear well, so I turn off all camera sounds. Focus settings choices are auto and manual. Autofocus in bridge cameras is fast and offers a variety of focal areas that can be selected by the photographer. Focus tracking and eye detection are just two examples. You may want to use spot autofocus until you learn how to fully use the autofocus settings in your camera. Learning to use your camera's manual focus is also important. Autofocus may not always perform as desired. Low lighting conditions and animals back in the brush are two such situations. Noise reduction. My goal is to have low noise in my photos, but I set my camera's noise reduction to low or off. Too much noise reduction in camera settings can eliminate finer details in the image. I would rather do any noise reduction in post-processing. I hope you derived some benefit from this video. Please join me for more in my series on wildlife photography using bridge cameras. Thank you for watching.